Hello and welcome into my studio. My name is Wendy Anderson and I'm so excited to paint with you today. I hope you're here because you're curious about painting. Maybe you've painted with me before, maybe you haven't. We are going to be painting this cute little painting, so maybe that's what you're drawn to, learning how to paint flowers. We're going to learn how to paint like a dark wood, and it's going to be really fun and easy. So paint along, grab your brushes. We're just using 3 brushes. A 1-inch flat, a 1/2-inch flat, and a number 4 round or something similar. And then we have your primary colors plus black and white. That is it. You can do it. So let's go ahead and start painting. All right, let's get started with our 1-inch flat brush. So I'm using this one first, and I'm also going to have a 1/2-inch flat on deck and a number 4 round or any kind of small round brush. Let's get our canvas wet just a bit so that we can blend a little better, or just get the paint on a little easier. And I'm going to go vertical today. So we're going to do vertical brush strokes. We're going to make some faux wood, which is really fun. So get that in there. And then we're going to make some brown. So brown is really easy to make. I'm going to just use red and yellow and add a little bit of black. And I kind of nailed that. I'm proud of myself. So see how it's like I want it kind of dark, but not too dark. Just adjust. If it's not dark enough, add a little bit of black at a time. Don't do it too fast because it will take over really quick. If it's too like yellowy, add more red. If it's too red, add more yellow. And if it's too dark, add more red and yellow. So you can get that just however you like it until it looks good. And like I said, I kind of feel like I nailed mine right away. I'm going to go ahead and add that vertically to my canvas. And this is just the first layer. So this is going to look kind of flat in comparison to the final result. But I usually, once I make one shade, I try to spread it around so that when I go to make another shade, it might not be exactly the same. And at least I have that first shade spread around so that it has some balance. If that makes any sense. So then I don't have so much pressure to mix the same exact shade of brown the second time I make the brown. So this is just something I do. It's totally up to you how you want to execute this. And you could even use pre-mixed brown. I'm not against using pre-mixed colors. I just think that it's fun to mix it. It just keeps me really in touch with the source of the color, you know, like how it formed from the primaries. And then I can also make it a little lighter by adding white to it. So I'm gonna add mostly like a pretty decent layer of just the brown. And then I might add a little bit of white to it in some spots. But notice how I can make it a little darker as well. So maybe before I add lighter shades, I'll add some darker shades. So try to get at least 3 shades of brown on your project here. And if it's not spreading on well, dip your brush in the water and mix it into your paint. This happens to me quite a bit just because of my location. So I'm in California and it's just always hot and dry for the most part. Maybe not always. But even when it's not that hot, it's still like a dry climate. So the paint is always a little bit hard to spread. And if you are in that kind of climate, that might be something that you should think about if you're struggling with your blending. So just throwing it out there. Could be the weather, not the paint or you. So sometimes we think it's just us, like something wrong with me, my paint. But really, it could just be the weather. You don't need to take everything personally. So you got the ability to, change your shades and mix a little water if it's not blending well. See what happens. I'm just continuing to mix that brown up. So as I run out, I make more. Pretty simple. And then I just want to make sure I have a decent coat on the whole entire canvas. Like we don't have any empty canvas on here. Got good layers. And then if you want to smooth it out, which I don't really care too much about with this one because we're going to add more layers for texture, but if you want to, you could just run the brush through. So now we have this really pretty brown color canvas. I'm going to take the big brush and then just put it aside. Now we're going to go ahead and add our lines between the wood. Now I like to just do 3 lines, one in the middle and then one dividing each line on the sides, just for simplicity's sake. And I'm going to use a card. You could use a palette knife, something, you know, like this if you have it. But I actually enjoy using a card for this because it even has a longer edge. And I'm just going to tap the long edge of my card in the black. And I'm going to go ahead and get this center at the top and the center at the bottom. I usually do 1 tap at the bottom, 1 tap at the top, and then I'm going to do halfway between the center and the edge on both sides too, top and bottom, and then you're going to connect the top and bottom. Just tap, or you could drag, whatever feels more fun. Now we have some lines, and I can go ahead and drag this on the canvas as well. So I'm almost like wiping the excess paint off onto the canvas. And this is going to give us some fun texture too. I like to keep it kind of heavy towards the top, like corners and the bottom and top edges with the dark. And then if I want some lighter shades, just mix a little bit of white into your brown, or even just use pure white. I'm going to mix a little bit in so it's not too crazy. And then you can add some lighter shades. And I'm just going in between those lines that we painted. And one thing that's so fun about this is that you really have to let go of control. And I know it's so hard for some of us to do this, but so worth it because part of the creative process, and in my opinion, painting especially, is sort of letting go of control and letting the process take you on an adventure, an unexpected journey, really. And if the more you let go of control of what's going on, the more interesting it's going to be. Now, it looks kind of rough, so what I typically do if it looks a little bit too textured is just come to your big brush, make sure it's not too wet, and then you can just smooth out some of the texture by brushing it into the background. And you can even come back to those shades of brown and paint over anything that got really outrageous. So see how I just softened this whole side right here? It's really easy to do. But don't take away from it completely. Like leave some of the little texture and stuff that you like. I'm just taking some of the big chunks and smoothing them out a bit. And then you can always go back and add more. Again, you can add more of the brown, like the first shade, to soften. You can go back and add lines. You can do a lot of different things. I'm gonna go and add a little bit more brown. So I like to do a little touch up. Notice how I can add white to it too. And that's just gonna allow me to go in there and like really take control of it and soften it, but also not making it too dark. Or if any of my dark lines got too crazy, I could soften them with that lighter shade of brown. And then the more the merrier with that, because the more different shades of brown you have, the more interesting it's going to look. Now, and I can always come to my medium brush to kind of re-establish the lines. So what you could achieve with the card, you could also play like the lines and stuff. You could also play with just using the edge of a square brush or something, because that might give you a little more control. And you could also add some fun touches like little wood knots with black. So if I make like a little oval and then I go in with the tip of the brush and outline it like a almost like an onion. You're making layers that pull out from that shape. It looks like a little wood knot. So that looks kind of cool. And you can add those wherever you want. Again, I can go back. I can add more light, more dark. And then you're going to let it go eventually. Don't overdo it. And then we want this to dry before we go into the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and blow dry it just to speed up the process. Now I'm going to start by making a jar for flowers to come out of. And I'm going to make a turquoise color for that. So I'm going to use that medium square brush for this part. I'm going to use blue, a touch of yellow, and a fair amount of white. Notice how it turned green pretty quick. Add more blue if it does that. If you use too much yellow, it's just going to look green, but I'm going for turquoise, so it should be heavy on the blue. Then once I have a good turquoise that I like, I'm going to go ahead and go up from the center about like 1/3 of the way or so, or a quarter, or somewhere around there. And I'm going to pull a slightly bent line that pulls from those outer two little slats. So I had those lines that come out about a quarter of the way in on each side. And that's where I'm going to put that. And then I'm going to have another line that slightly smiley faces underneath. So it's like this squashed pancake. And then what I can do is pull vertically on both sides, just maybe about the width of the brush, like a 1/2 inch or so. And then I'm going to pull across. And then I'm going to go a little bit below and then just make a little diagonal line that pulls back out to that line again and then comes straight down. That. So now we have the bottom of a jar essentially, and I can make some horizontal lines within the top portion. You can just sort of streak some dry brushing, which is just a really soft brush stroke that doesn't get too much paint on. And then notice I can go horizontally on the edge. I could also go vertically on the other edge, so you can play with the direction of your brush. Voila, now we have a little shape of a jar. So much fun. Now I'm going to do the flowers first, then we'll build our stems. So for the flowers, I do recommend the round brush. So make sure you're using that round brush. And we'll do the centers first in kind of like a yellow orange type color. So I'm using yellow with a tiny bit of red and then white. And what I want to do is add a few flowers. So I'm going to do one right here. I'm going to do one here. I'm going to do 3 of these kinds, and then I'll do one like right here. I have 3 of these kinds of flowers, and then I'll have some other foliage in the painting as well. We'll do different colors. We're going to start with this one. And then we're going to build. So I'm going to have mostly adding red and white, and it's okay if I still have a little bit of yellow mixed in, but I'm adding a bunch more red and white to my mix so that it's more peachy or pink looking. This is what we want to do. And then I'm going to go to my flowers, and what I want to do is pull on a diagonal. I'm going to pull brush strokes that pull from the outside and that pull in like this towards the center, just like that. And then on the bottom, I'm going to pull down, and I'm just going to keep going until it's filled in. But notice how the tip of my brush is at the tip of the petal, and then I pull it back toward the center. You should have about maybe 5 or 6 petals at least. 4 would be too few, so I had to do 4. And then I can add more red and white to make it even less yellow toned as I go. So just play around with the shades. I'm going to add another one here. This one's going to go maybe more pointing up. So I'll put from these sides, like go like this. And so easy. And then maybe this last one's just a little more red. Maybe it's kind of pointing this way, so here we go. So now we have these fun 3 little flowers. Now the other thing I can do is just make some different kinds of flowers. So those are obviously one type of flower that you could do. And we fix this a little bit. There we go. And then maybe I have some really tiny little white daisies. So I can go back to my little yellowish kind of color. So my yellow with a touch of red and white. Maybe I make this a little more orange. So maybe a little more red. I'm going with like an orange. And then I could put some more little circles. I'm going to put one like here. Maybe I'll make them a little smaller though. And I'll do here. Okay. Then I'm going to add a ton of white to my brush to where maybe there's a little bit of that yellow residue, but it's mostly white. So see how I didn't clean my brush? There might be a little bit of this red, yellow kind of orange in there, but it's mostly white. And then I can make a full ring around flower like this. Goes all the way around. Super cute. We're up here. Yep. Now we have those little flowers. And then maybe you do one last little kind of flower. And these ones can be, I'm trying to think of another color that we could do that doesn't interfere. Let's do, and figure it out. I'm gonna need more yellow on my palette too. But let's go ahead and do purple. Let's just do purple. All right, so we're gonna do blue and red. I'm just making this up as I go. That's just kind of what I wanted to do with the channel. I didn't want it to be too planned out because it's fun to, I think I personally enjoy the spontaneity of the creative process and have like a loose plan, but I don't like over plan. But see, I could add a little bit of white to that purple. And then what we can do is make another flower that's maybe more like little dabs that are thicker and then get thinner as you pull up. Maybe like a little bit of a lavender kind of thing. So I'll do a couple. I'm just tapping and clustering. Tap some here. And I'm going to do one more coming up right here. And then I'm going to call it done with the flowers. So we have 3 different kinds of flowers with 3 different flowers each. So it's like 3 of each kind and 3 different ones. So sometimes picking numbers like that actually has a great significance. And it really does help to create more balance in your painting. I can even take some of that purple onto my jar. So see how I can pull that onto the jar? And just let it play as a shadow color in there a little bit. Especially on the inside of the rim here. There. Now we're going to add some foliage. And then we're going to finish up with some highlights, and then we'll be done. So it's super easy. I always tell people, you really don't need that much time to paint. Just really easy. So for green, we're using yellow and blue. And I'm just starting with a medium shade of green. Not too dark, not too light. And then I'm going to pull from each flower, the center, and then pull straight down into the jar. And sometimes you might have to pick up your brush so that you're not like painting over a flower or anything like that, which is fine. So for example, the lavender one might have a stem that pulls under this other flower. Same here. But just use your imagination with that. He has some kind of going this way, some going this way, and it goes straight down into the jar. Now to create, you want to make sure you have a couple shades of green. So I'm going to do another pass at that with a little more yellow and maybe even a little bit of white mixed in. Notice how my brush is getting kind of bushely, so I'm going to twist it out. Make sure your color is light. And then go and do your second pass at it. And try not to cover your first shade all the way. I'm just barely adding to it to create a highlight. But it's also going to make it stand out a lot more on that dark background. So that'll look cool. All these little things matter. And it's worth it to put the extra effort in because it shows in the finished painting. And I always tell people it's so worth it. Just do it. And then maybe you have, I'm just cleaning the brush to make sure it gets kind of built up. Maybe we have some like leaves spilling out a bit. So maybe I go back to that darker shade of green or just make an in-between shade. It doesn't have to be too dark or too light. And then I could have like little leaves coming out of some of my things here. Like this lavender can have some leaves. Put some leaves here. And then you can just have some leaves coming out like its own little foliage. So sometimes I'll do a little bit of that. This just fills up the arrangement, keeping it kind of fun and fresh. Make sure you do at least like 3 of those. So I have one little pattern and I have another one coming off the lavender. And then, so 2, and then this can kind of count as one down here. You want to have at least a few areas where you see the leaves pretty predominantly. Add a little bit right here. And then we're going to do another pass at the flowers with a lighter shade. So for example, I will add another layer to the centers using more yellow and white in the initial mix than we did in the initial mix. So for this one, it would just be a little bit of dabbing towards the top with that lighter shade, more yellow and white. Dab towards the top of the center. So a little bit of dabbing towards the top. And then the other one was more of an orange, so I could just make a lighter shade of orange and go towards the top of the center of these little white flowers, doing our little highlights. And then you can do the actual flowers too. So the purple ones don't have centers, so we're just going to work on these ones first. But you want to make sure there's a shadow color in the centers too, which would be a deep orange. So if I have more red, to the point where it's like kind of a dark orange, like mostly red with a little bit of yellow, and then put that towards the base of your center or the bottom side of the centers. There. And then you can go into that peach color, that peachy pink, that first color, and just make it a little bit different. Or you know what, it's going to be a little different no matter. Actually, I got that pretty close. Maybe add a little more white and then do another pass at it. And don't cover your first layer all the way. Should just be able to see a different shade on the second layer. So they kind of jump out at you a little more. Now, same thing with the white flowers. Maybe I just take that pinky color and mix a bunch of white in like I did the first time with the yellow. So it'll be a different shade, but still really light. And then I'll just pop that in. There we go. And then I'm going to clean the brush and do the lavender. Now the lavender is going to get more white and red. The more white and red you add to that purple, the brighter it's going to be. I'm adding that. And then I'm just going to dab that on top of the purple, leaving the first shade showing a bit. Don't completely dab over it. And this is one of the reasons I like to work kind of quickly with acrylics, is because these kinds of things turn out better if your paint is still a little bit wet. It'll smush with and blend with the purple that's already there, and doing a lot of that work for you to create more than just a couple shades. It'll create a lot of shades almost inadvertently. And then maybe add even a little more red and white again and do another pass. So you want to have at least 3 shades showing though, minimum. And anything more than that is just bonus. It's like good. 5 is actually another good number to play with, but for the simplicity of these videos, like I'm always trying to keep it really simple. I say 3 is gonna work just fine as well. So you should see multiple shades, and also on your leaves and stuff if you don't add more. I'm gonna keep mine as is because I think I got enough for the video, for the simplicity of it. And then I'm gonna go with the clean square brush, and I'm gonna add a bunch of white into my turquoise to where I have a really light shade of turquoise. And we're gonna go in and outline our jar with that really light shade, and I'm going right over those green. I'm not doing the back though, because the back is actually the stems are actually on top of that, and they should be, but this highlight is going to go in front of the stems. So you can add a few of those horizontal lines for the threading of the jar. You can outline the edge a bit. It's just like not even like a solid outline. It's just like little partial highlights. And then I can like wiggle the brush horizontally or vertically to create some highlighting. And then there you have it. Now, again, I can add more to this. I can always add more. You can always add more highlights. You can always add more shadows. You can always add more layers to the flowers. Like the kinds of things that I would do in the end would just simply be adding more. So like, for example, if you wanted these little light colored flowers to have a little more depth, you can always take like that orange or a peach color or just anything with like a little more red in it. And you can pull from the center out a little bit into the petals, just ever so slightly. It'll create a kind of shadow color coming from the center, and it can be really subtle. But sometimes doing those little things gives a little extra oomph to your painting. So if you feel that it's missing something, or you just are really enjoying the process and you want to keep going, these are the kinds of little things I would recommend doing. Just little bits. And you can do the same thing with these ones. So the more red you have, the darker you're going to get like a shadow color. I even have accidentally a little bit of blue mixed in, but that's okay too. And you could go and pull a little bit from the center out and just create a little bit of shading there. No, you don't have to, but again, I like to show that you can take it further if that's something that you want to do. And you get to decide and you get to play with it. If you want to give a little extra shine to your painting, which I just kind of typically do because I like it to look shiny, that's just me. You could take your small round brush, get it nice and clean and dry, and then just do pure white and add it maybe to some of your, like some of the jar here. Maybe you add it to the tips of some of the flowers, like little dabs of white towards the top. Just a little bit. Maybe a little bit to white on the lavender, little dots. And it just makes everything look shiny. So fun. You can even do a little bit on the leaves or the stems, maybe just in a couple spots. So these are the kinds of things I do in the end: highlights, shadows, just any other little thing to make it look shiny. You can do like some on the tips of the flowers, like just towards the top of the shapes. Give it some highlight. You could even go in with more texture in the background. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to overdo and I want to let it go. But you have this like dark background, this dark wood looking background with these bright pastel flowers. It's a really nice contrast and it's so easy to do. So I hope you had fun. Make sure to leave a comment. Let me know what other fun stuff you'd like to paint. I love to get ideas from you guys of like subjects that you want to learn. And it's just like, it's fun to paint stuff that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. So I love your feedback, and I thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Bye.